The air in the shuttle felt too thin for Zara Velox. Her four-fingered hands trembled slightly as she smoothed the formal robes that marked her as a diplomat of the Centauri Coalition. Through the viewport, Earth grew larger, a blue and green jewel against the blackness of space. "We begin descent in 5 minutes, Diplomat Velox," said the pilot, his voice crackling through the intercom. Zara nodded, though no one could see her. 3 years of bloody conflict between humans and Centauri had led to this moment. She was the third diplomat sent to negotiate peace. The first 2 had failed. "The humans have agreed to all security protocols," her assistant Nix reminded her. The younger Centauri's skin shifted from anxious purple to a calmer blue. "You'll be safe." Zara wasn't so sure. Humans were unpredictable creatures. Their bodies were oddly rigid, lacking the fluid grace of Centauri physiology. Their emotions seemed to burst from them without warning. How could she negotiate with beings so different? "I've studied their customs," Zara said quietly. "I know their greeting rituals and their body language. I can do this." The shuttle rocked as it entered Earth's atmosphere. Zara closed her inner eyelids to calm herself. The war had begun with a misunderstanding over a small asteroid belt rich in rare minerals. A translation error had escalated into weapons fire. Then full-scale battles across 3 star systems. Now millions were dead on both sides. "Landing in 2 minutes," announced the pilot. When the shuttle touched down at the Geneva Peace Center, Zara took a deep breath of the filtered air. The gravity felt strange, heavier than she was used to. She stood, straightened her ceremonial sash, and moved toward the exit ramp. "Remember, show confidence," Nix whispered. "Humans respect strength." The ramp lowered, revealing a group of humans in formal attire. Behind them stood soldiers in dark uniforms, weapons visible but lowered. Zara felt her skin ripple with unease, but she kept it a dignified blue shade. A human woman stepped forward. "Diplomat Velox, I'm Ambassador Olivia Grant. Welcome to Earth." Zora performed the human greeting ritual, extending her hand. The ambassador's skin felt warm and dry against her own. "Thank you for this opportunity," Zora replied in careful English. "The Centauri desire peace." A line of vehicles waited to transport them to the conference hall. Zara noted the heavy security, armored cars in front and behind their sleek black vehicle. As they drove through the city, Ambassador Grant pointed out landmarks. Zara tried to focus, but her mind raced with the importance of her mission. Failure meant more death. Success meant saving countless lives. Suddenly, a deafening explosion rocked the vehicle ahead of them. Their driver slammed on the brakes. "Get down," a human security officer shouted, pushing Zara to the floor. Gunfire erupted around them. Through the window, Zara saw masked figures moving between buildings. "Extremists," Ambassador Grant explained, her face pale. "They don't want peace." The car door was wrenched open. A human security officer fell, blood spreading across his chest. Zara froze in terror. "This way." Nix pulled at her arm. They tumbled out the opposite door as more explosions shook the ground. They ran down an alley, the sounds of fighting behind them. Nix suddenly gasped, stumbling forward. A projectile had struck her in the back. "Go," Nix whispered, her skin turning gray. "Complete the mission." Tears blurred Zora's vision as she fled alone, her formal robes making her an obvious target. She ducked into a narrow passage between buildings, heart pounding. Footsteps approached. Zora pressed herself against the wall, trying to control her breathing. Her skin involuntarily shifted to match the wall's color, a defense mechanism. A shadow fell across the alley entrance. A human figure appeared, tall and armed. A soldier. Zara tried to stay calm. Then she saw the human soldier look directly at her, his weapon raised. Sergeant Mason Rivers had been patrolling the security perimeter when all hell broke loose. 1 minute he was checking his watch, thinking about lunch. The next, explosions tore through the diplomatic convoy. His training kicked in immediately. All units respond. Diplomats under attack. His radio crackled with urgent voices and static. Mason sprinted toward the chaos, assault rifle ready. 3 years fighting the Centauri across 2 star systems hadn't prepared him for protecting one on his home planet. Yet that was his mission today. He rounded a corner and spotted movement in an alley, a flash of color that didn't belong. The wall itself seemed to ripple with blues and grays. Mason raised his weapon and moved closer. There she was, the Centauri diplomat, pressing herself against the wall, her skin shifting colors in a camouflage pattern. Her large, iridescent eyes widened in terror when she saw him. Mason lowered his weapon slightly. "I'm Sergeant Rivers, United Earth Defense. I'm here to help." The alien remained frozen, her skin now pulsing with frightened orange patterns. Mason remembered his briefing. Centauri skin changed colors with their emotions. Orange meant fear. "Ma'am, we need to move. Those attackers will find us soon." Her 4-fingered hand trembled as she pointed to his rifle. "You killed Centauri." Mason felt a pang of guilt. Yes, he had killed her kind during the war, just as her people had killed his friends. But today was different. "Not today," he said firmly. "Today I protect you. That's my job." A burst of gunfire nearby made them both flinch. Mason made a quick decision and removed his tactical vest, offering it to her. "Put this on. It'll hide your clothing." The colorful diplomatic robes made her an easy target. To his surprise, she complied, slipping her arms through the oversized vest. Her movements were graceful despite her obvious terror. "I'm Sergeant Mason Rivers," he said again, more gently this time. "What should I call you?" "Zara Velox," she replied, her voice melodic despite her fear. "Third diplomatic emissary of the Centauri Coalition." "Well, Emissary Velox, we need to get you to safety. There's a secure building 3 blocks north." Another explosion rocked the street behind them. Mason grabbed Zora's arm instinctively, then released it when she flinched. "Sorry," he muttered. "Different customs." "It is acceptable in an emergency," she replied, her skin shifting to a calmer blue with streaks of cautious yellow. They moved together through the alley, Mason checking each corner before proceeding. The sound of fighting grew more distant. "Who attacks?" Zora asked quietly. "Not sure. Could be anti-peace extremists. Could be mercenaries paid by people who profit from the war." Zara nodded grimly. "We have such people among Centauri too." A drone buzzed overhead. Mason pulled Zara into a doorway, shielding her with his body. The machine hovered, scanning the area with a red beam. "Hostile tech," Mason whispered. "Don't move." Zora's breathing quickened. Mason could feel her heartbeats, much faster than a human's, through his arm pressed against her shoulder. The drone moved on, continuing its search pattern down the street. "How do you know where to go?" Zara asked when they resumed moving. "This is my city. I grew up here before joining the Marines." Mason checked his wrist device. "Plus, I have a map." For the first time, Zora's face formed what might have been a smile, her features arranging in an expression Mason hadn't seen on Centauri before. They reached an intersection. Mason peered around the corner and immediately pulled back. 3 armed figures in black were checking buildings across the street. "We can't go that way," he whispered. Zara's skin paled to an ashen gray. "They will kill me. The peace talks will fail." Mason looked at her, really looked at her. Not as an alien, not as the enemy he'd been fighting for years, but as a person who was scared and far from home. A person whose life he was responsible for. "Not if I can help it," he said, checking his weapon. "Stay close to me, Zora. We'll find another way." Her skin brightened slightly, flickers of hopeful blue appearing amidst the gray. "I will follow you, Sergeant Rivers." Rain began to fall as Mason led Zora through narrow back streets. The water droplets made her skin glisten with a pearlescent sheen. Mason noticed how she tilted her face upward, seemingly enjoying the sensation. "You like rain?" he asked quietly as they paused in a sheltered doorway. "We have no rain on my world," she replied. Only mist chambers for hydration. This is pleasant. A distant explosion interrupted the moment. Mason checked his device again. Safe house is 8 blocks north, but the main routes are probably watched. Zora's skin rippled with anxiety. How will we reach it? Underground, Mason said, pointing to a maintenance access cover in the street. Service tunnels run beneath the city. Mason pried open the heavy metal cover and gestured for Zara to climb down first. The ladder descended into darkness, but Mason's headlamp provided enough light for them to see. The tunnel was narrow and damp. Pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping in places. Mason led the way, his weapon ready. "Your world," he said to break the uncomfortable silence. "What's it like?" Zara seemed surprised by the question. "Centauria is mostly ocean. Our cities float on the surface or hang from cliffs. The sky is purple instead of blue. Sounds beautiful." "It is." Her voice softened. "Before the war, we welcomed visitors from many worlds. Humans came too, to trade and learn." Mason nodded. "I remember. My cousin visited once. Said it was the most peaceful place he had ever seen." A bitter laugh escaped Zara. "Not anymore." They walked in silence for several minutes, the only sounds their footsteps and distant water dripping. "How did it happen?" Zara finally asked. "The war? My superiors never explained clearly." Mason sighed. "Depends who you ask. Our side says your military fired on a mining vessel in the SETI asteroid belt. Your side probably has a different story. We were told humans planted weapons platforms disguised as mining equipment." Zara's skin darkened to a thoughtful purple, "but I never understood why we couldn't talk first." "That's the thing about war," Mason said grimly. "Once it starts, talking seems too late." A sudden noise ahead made Mason raise his hand, signaling Zara to stop. He motioned for her to press against the wall as he moved forward slowly. 3 figures in black tactical gear appeared around the corner, lights scanning the tunnel. "Down," Mason hissed, pushing Zara into a side passage. Too late. One of the lights caught her reflective skin. "Target spotted," a voice called out. Mason pushed Zara behind him as he returned fire. The confined space amplified the gunshots to a deafening roar. One attacker fell, but the others kept advancing. "Run," Mason shouted to Zara. "Follow the tunnel. I'll hold them off." Instead of fleeing, Zara picked up a length of broken pipe. When one attacker got past Mason's position, she swung it with surprising strength, connecting with the figure's head. The attacker dropped, but not before firing. Mason felt the bullet tear through his side. Hot pain blossomed across his ribs as he stumbled. With unexpected agility, Zara caught him before he fell. Her strength surprised him, her slender frame concealing muscles adapted to Centauria's higher gravity. "Now we run," she said, supporting his weight as they fled deeper into the tunnels. They found a maintenance room and barricaded the door. Mason slumped against the wall, blood seeping between his fingers as he pressed his hand to the wound. "Let me see." Zara knelt beside him, her fingers gentle as she examined the injury. The projectile passed through. "You are fortunate." "Don't feel fortunate," Mason grunted through clenched teeth. Zara removed her diplomatic sash and folded it into a pad. "Our biology is different, but blood works the same way. You must keep pressure here." She placed his hand firmly over the wound, then began searching the room for supplies. "Why did you help me back there?" Mason asked, watching her move purposefully through the dimly lit space. "You could have escaped." Zora paused, her skin shifting to a deep, thoughtful blue. "Because today, you are not my enemy." Mason nodded slowly, understanding something profound had changed between them. "Neither are you," he replied softly. The maintenance room hummed with the sound of distant machinery. Mason leaned against a wall, his breathing labored but steady. Zara had found a first aid kit and was carefully cleaning his wound. "Our medical officers study human physiology," she explained, applying antiseptic. We must know how to heal what we damage in war. Mason winced at both the sting and her words. Makes sense in a grim way. Hold still. Zara's fingers worked with surprising gentleness. Her skin had taken on a concentrated green hue that Mason hadn't seen before. What does green mean? He asked, trying to distract himself from the pain. Zara glanced up, surprised. You know our colors have meaning. Basic training. They taught us blue is calm, red is anger, orange is fear. Never saw green before. Green is focus, concentration. She applied a bandage with precise movements, sometimes also healing or growth. Mason studied her face as she worked. Without his combat training filtering his perceptions, he could see the intelligence in her large eyes, the careful precision in her movements. Why did you become a diplomat? He asked. Zara's hands paused momentarily. My clutch sister died in the first year of war, shot down over Proxima Centauri. I'm sorry. I wanted to ensure no more sisters died, no more brothers either. She secured the bandage. Human or Centauri? Mason nodded slowly. My younger brother joined up after me. He's stationed on Europa now. You worry for him. Every day. Silence fell between them. Mason checked his communication device, but the underground location blocked all signals. We should rest, Zara suggested. Those pursuers will expect us to keep moving. Mason agreed. He needed time for the pain medications Zora had given him to work. They found some maintenance uniforms hanging on hooks and used them as makeshift pillows. May I ask something personal? Zara said after they had settled. Sure. In battle, have you killed many Centauri? Mason stiffened. Yes. How did it feel? The question hung in the air. Mason had never been asked this, not even by fellow soldiers. Terrible, he finally admitted, but also nothing. In the moment, you're trained to think of targets, not people. It's after when you remember they have families, dreams. That's when it hurts. Zora's skin shifted to a somber indigo. We are taught humans feel nothing when they kill, that you are cold inside, and we're told Centauri enjoy the hunt of battle. Mason smiled grimly. Propaganda works both ways. It seems we have both been deceived. Mason nodded, then winced as pain shot through his side. The medication needs time, Zara said. Sleep if you can. Despite his training to stay alert, Mason felt exhaustion washing over him. Wake me in 2 hours, he murmured. He drifted to sleep watching Zora's skin shift through thoughtful patterns of blue and purple. Mason dreamed of oceans and floating cities under a purple sky. When Zora gently shook him awake, he was momentarily confused by her alien features. You were speaking in your sleep, she said. What did I say? Names. Many names. Mason nodded grimly. My squad. The ones who didn't come home. Zara sat beside him, her skin a respectful deep blue. Will you tell me about them? The request surprised him. No one asked about the dead anymore. It made people uncomfortable. My best friend was Kyle. Farm boy from Iowa. Could fix anything mechanical. Mason found himself continuing, the words flowing easier than expected. Alice was our sniper. Had a little girl she never got to meet. Raj told the worst jokes but always shared his rations. As Mason spoke of his fallen friends, he noticed Zora's skin developing ripples of gold, a color he hadn't seen before. What does gold mean? He asked when he finished. Honor, Zara replied quietly. Gold is for honoring those who have passed beyond. Mason felt something tight inside his chest loosen slightly. He carried these memories alone for so long. Thank you, he said simply. Zara nodded. In knowing your grief, perhaps we find common ground. Mason checked his bandage. The bleeding had stopped. I think I can move now. We should try to reach the safe house before dawn. As they gathered their few supplies, Mason realized something had fundamentally changed. The alien diplomat was becoming something he hadn't expected. A friend. Dawn was breaking as Mason and Zara emerged from a service exit 2 blocks from the safe house. The streets were eerily quiet, with occasional military vehicles patrolling in the distance. Something's not right, Mason muttered, scanning the area. There should be more search teams if a diplomat is missing. Zara's skin rippled with concern. Perhaps they believe I am dead, or someone doesn't want you found. Mason checked his weapon. Stay close. They moved carefully, using parked vehicles and doorways as cover. Zara had become surprisingly adept at urban movement, mirroring Mason's techniques. The safe house was an unassuming apartment building with reinforced windows. Mason approached cautiously, studying the security cameras. Wait here, he told Zara, positioning her in a sheltered doorway. Something feels off. Mason circled the building, noting the lack of visible security, unusual for a diplomatic safe house. He returned to Zara, his expression grim. I don't like it. Standard protocol, we have armed guards visible at entry points. Zara's skin darkened with worry. What do we do? Mason considered their options. I have a contact nearby. Someone I trust. We'll go there instead. They changed course, moving toward a residential area. Mason became increasingly alert, checking every corner and alleyway. My friend Cody lives 3 blocks south, Mason explained. Former Marine. Left the service after losing his leg at the Battle of Titan. As they approached a small apartment complex, Mason's device suddenly buzzed. They were back in communication range. Multiple messages flashed across the screen. What is it? Zara asked, noticing his expression. Orders to bring you to headquarters immediately. Mason's brow furrowed. Signed by Colonel Lisa Hartman. Is that unusual? Very. Hartman commands my unit, but she's not part of diplomatic security. Mason scrolled through more messages. Something bigger is happening here. They reached Cody's apartment. Mason knocked in a specific pattern. 3 quick taps, 2 slow. The door opened to reveal a man with a prosthetic leg, his eyes widening at the sight of Zara. Jesus, Rivers, when you said you needed help, I didn't expect this. He ushered them quickly inside and locked the door. Cody, this is diplomat Zara Velox. Zara, my friend Cody Bennett. Cody nodded curtly to Zara, then turned to Mason. You're all over the emergency channels. Some saying you kidnapped her, others saying you're both targeted by extremists. What? Mason's face hardened. That's not what happened. Cody activated a wall screen showing news feeds. Images of Mason and Zara appeared, captured by security cameras during their escape. Human soldier abducts Centauri diplomat. Zara read aloud, her skin paling to a shocked white. Peace talks in jeopardy. Another feed showed Colonel Hartman addressing reporters. We are doing everything possible to recover diplomat Velox from this rogue element. Mason slammed his fist against the wall. This is a setup. They're painting me as a traitor. But why? Zara asked. Cody switched to another screen showing financial data. I've been monitoring suspicious activity since I left the service. Something never felt right about this war. He pointed to transaction records. These companies show massive profit spikes every time peace talks fail. Defense contractors, private security firms, resource extraction corporations. On both sides. Zara leaned closer. Exactly. Cody highlighted several names. These same entities have subsidiaries on Centauria and Earth. They're playing both sides. Mason's expression darkened as one name stood out, Hartman Defense Technologies. Colonel Hartman's family company, he said grimly. She stands to lose billions if the war ends. Zara's skin shifted through patterns of shock and anger. My superior, Envoy Dorax, has investments in similar ventures. Her voice trembled. We've been betrayed by our own leaders. Mason turned to her, his eyes determined. The attack on your convoy wasn't a random act by extremists. It was orchestrated, Zara finished, her skin now a deep, angry red. To ensure the peace talks failed. Cody nodded grimly. And now they're hunting you both to silence you. Mason checked his weapon and turned to Zara. We have evidence now, but no way to safely present it. We need allies, Zara said, her color shifting to a resolute blue. People on both sides who want the truth exposed. I know who we can trust, Mason said, but reaching them won't be easy. Zora placed her four-fingered hand on Mason's arm, her touch firmer than before. Nothing about peace is ever easy, Sergeant Rivers. For the first time since the attack, Mason felt hope stirring. With Zara at his side, perhaps they stood a chance against the forces that had kept their worlds at war. You need to get this evidence to Captain Diane Foster, Cody said, transferring files to a secure drive. She's stationed at the Eastern Command Center and has been suspicious of Hartman for months. Mason nodded. Diane's solid. If anyone will listen, it's her. Zora paced the small apartment, her skin shifting between determined blue and anxious yellow. I must also contact someone from my delegation. Junior Envoy Calx has questioned our leadership's decisions before. How do we reach both? Mason asked. We're being hunted by everyone. Cody smiled grimly. I might have a way. Not exactly regulation, but... He moved to a closet and pulled out a small case. Inside was a communication device unlike any standard military issue. Prototype quantum transmitter, Cody explained. I borrowed it when I left service. It can breach both human and Centauri security protocols. That's highly illegal, Mason said, impressed despite himself. So is framing you for kidnapping. Cody activated the device. This will get you a direct line to whoever you need, but only for 2 minutes before they can trace it. While Cody prepared the transmitter, Mason checked the street through a narrow gap in the blinds. A patrol vehicle moved slowly past the building. They're searching the neighborhood, he warned. We need to move soon. Zora joined him at the window. Those aren't standard military vehicles, she observed. The markings are wrong. Mason looked closer. She was right. The vehicles bore the subtle logo of a private security company. Mercenaries, he growled. Hartman is using contractors to do her dirty work. The transmitter hummed to life. Cody handed it to Mason. Ready when you are. Mason took a deep breath and activated the call to Captain Foster. After a tense moment, her face appeared on the small screen. Rivers, what the hell? Ma'am, no time to explain everything. Mason interrupted. You're being fed lies about me and the Centauri diplomat. We have evidence of corruption reaching to Colonel Hartman and beyond. He transferred the files while speaking. Foster's expression shifted from confusion to shock as she reviewed the data. This is extensive, she said, her voice hushed. But why would Hartman? War profits, Mason said simply. Sending the evidence now. Trust no one in her command chain. The connection ended abruptly as the 2-minute window closed. Mason handed the device to Zora. Your turn. Zora's fingers moved gracefully over the unfamiliar controls, inputting a complex Centauri communication code. Junior Envoy Calx's startled face appeared moments later. They conversed rapidly in the flowing Centauri language. Mason couldn't understand the words, but the urgency was clear. Zora transferred the same evidence before their connection also cut out. He will help, Zora said, her skin brightening with hope. Calx has suspected corruption but lacked proof. A sudden bang on the apartment door made them all freeze. Security forces. Open up. Cody motioned them toward the back room. Fire escape. Go. Mason hesitated. What about you? I'll stall them. Cody grabbed his service pistol. Been looking for a chance to raise hell anyway. Mason clasped his friend's shoulder. Stay alive. We'll need your testimony later. Count on it. Cody grinned. Now move. Mason and Zara slipped through the window onto the fire escape just as Cody opened the door, loudly complaining about harassment of veterans. They descended quickly, reaching the alley below as shouting erupted from the apartment. This way, Mason directed, leading Zora through a maze of back streets. Eastern Command is 5 miles north. We'll need transportation. Zara suddenly pulled Mason into a shadowed doorway as a drone passed overhead. "They're using thermal scanners," she whispered. "My body temperature differs from humans. They'll spot me easily." Mason thought quickly. "We need to mask your heat signature." He led her to a nearby construction site. Inside a storage container, he found what he was looking for: emergency thermal blankets. "Wrap this around you," he instructed. "It'll reflect your body heat back, making you harder to detect." As Zara adjusted the blanket, Mason spotted an unattended worker's truck with keys in the ignition. "Our ride," he said with a grim smile. They climbed in, Mason quickly hot-wiring the vehicle to bypass any security protocols. "Contact your side again when we reach Eastern Command," Mason said as they drove. "We'll need both human and Centauri forces to move against these people." Zara nodded, her skin now a determined, steady blue. "For 3 years we fought over a misunderstanding, while these corrupt few profited from death." Mason's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Well, now they'll answer for it." Ahead, the Eastern Command Center's communications tower rose against the morning sky. Their destination, and perhaps their only chance to end the war neither of them had wanted. "Ready?" Mason asked as they approached a military checkpoint. Zara straightened, her dignified diplomat's bearing returning despite her disheveled appearance. "Together," she replied simply. "I need to get this evidence to Captain Diane Foster," Cody said, transferring files to a secure drive. "She's stationed at the Eastern Command Center and has been suspicious of Hartman for months." Mason nodded. "Diane's solid. If anyone will listen, it's her." Zora paced the small apartment, her skin shifting between determined blue and anxious yellow. "I must also contact someone from my delegation. Junior Envoy Calx has questioned our leadership's decisions before." "How do we reach both?" Mason asked. "We're being hunted by everyone." Cody smiled grimly. "I might have a way. Not exactly regulation, but..." He moved to a closet and pulled out a small case. Inside was a communication device, unlike any standard military issue. "Prototype quantum transmitter," Cody explained. "I borrowed it when I left service. It can breach both human and Centauri security protocols." "That's highly illegal," Mason said, impressed despite himself. "So is framing you for kidnapping." Cody activated the device. "This will get you a direct line to whoever you need, but only for 2 minutes before they can trace it." While Cody prepared the transmitter, Mason checked the street through a narrow gap in the blinds. A patrol vehicle moved slowly past the building. "They're searching the neighborhood," he warned. "We need to move soon." Zora joined him at the window. "Those aren't standard military vehicles," she observed. "The markings are wrong." Mason looked closer. She was right. The vehicles bore the subtle logo of a private security company. "Mercenaries," he growled. "Hartman is using contractors to do her dirty work." The transmitter hummed to life. Cody handed it to Mason. "Ready when you are." Mason took a deep breath and activated the call to Captain Foster. After a tense moment, her face appeared on the small screen. "Rivers, what the hell?" "Ma'am, no time to explain everything," Mason interrupted. "You're being fed lies about me and the Centauri diplomat. We have evidence of corruption reaching to Colonel Hartman and beyond." He transferred the files while speaking. Foster's expression shifted from confusion to shock as she reviewed the data. "This is extensive," she said, her voice hushed. "But why would Hartman?" "War profits," Mason said simply. "Sending the evidence now. Trust no one in her command chain." The connection ended abruptly as the 2-minute window closed. Mason handed the device to Zora. "Your turn." Zora's fingers moved gracefully over the unfamiliar controls, inputting a complex Centauri communication code. Junior Envoy Calx's startled face appeared moments later. They conversed rapidly in the flowing Centauri language. Mason couldn't understand the words, but the urgency was clear. Zara transferred the same evidence before their connection also cut out. "He will help," Zara said, her skin brightening with hope. "Calx has suspected corruption but lacked proof. A sudden bang on the apartment door made them all freeze. "Security forces, open up." Cody motioned them toward the back room. "Fire escape. Go." Mason hesitated. "What about you?" "I'll stall them." Cody grabbed his service pistol. "Been looking for a chance to raise hell anyway." Mason clasped his friend's shoulder. "Stay alive. We'll need your testimony later." "Count on it." Cody grinned. "Now move." Mason and Zara slipped through the window onto the fire escape just as Cody opened the door, loudly complaining about harassment of veterans. They descended quickly, reaching the alley below as shouting erupted from the apartment. "This way," Mason directed, leading Zara through a maze of back streets. "Eastern Command is 5 miles north. We'll need transportation." Zara suddenly pulled Mason into a shadowed doorway as a drone passed overhead. "They're using thermal scanners," she whispered. "My body temperature differs from humans. They'll spot me easily." Mason fought quickly. "We need to mask your heat signature." He led her to a nearby construction site. Inside a storage container, he found what he was looking for: emergency thermal blankets. "Wrap this around you," he instructed. "It'll reflect your body heat back, making you harder to detect." As Zara adjusted the blanket, Mason spotted an unattended worker's truck with keys in the ignition. "Our ride," he said with a grim smile. They climbed in, Mason quickly hot-wiring the vehicle to bypass any security protocols. "Contact your side again when we reach Eastern Command," Mason said as they drove. "We'll need both human and Centauri forces to move against these people." Zara nodded, her skin now a determined, steady blue. "For 3 years we fought over a misunderstanding, while these corrupt few profited from death." Mason's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Well, now they'll answer for it." Ahead, the Eastern Command Center's communications tower rose against the morning sky. Their destination, and perhaps their only chance to end the war neither of them had wanted. "Ready?" Mason asked as they approached a military checkpoint. Zara straightened, her dignified diplomat's bearing returning despite her disheveled appearance. "Together," she replied simply. The Eastern Command Center loomed before them, its security perimeter bustling with activity. Mason parked the truck in a service area and turned to Zara. "Captain Foster should have received our evidence by now," he said, "but we still need to get inside without being captured by Hartman's people." Zara's skin shifted to a resolute blue with streaks of gold. Determination mixed with hope. "After all we've been through, this cannot be where we fail." A convoy of vehicles approached the main gate. Mason recognized the markings of the Diplomatic Security Division. "Look," he pointed. Junior Envoy Calx must have acted quickly. Through the tinted windows, they glimpsed Centauri forms being escorted inside by human security personnel. "Now's our chance," Mason said. "The confusion of their arrival will give us cover." They moved swiftly toward a side entrance where deliveries were processed. Mason's military ID still functioned. Whoever had framed him hadn't yet revoked his base access. "Stay close," he whispered as they slipped inside. "Keep the thermal blanket wrapped tightly." The corridors were a hive of activity. Screens displayed breaking news. "PACTALKs to Arias UME and QORUPTYON ALEGATION's ROC Military Command. Our evidence is already making waves," Zara observed, her voice tight with tension. They navigated toward the command center, avoiding direct contact with the personnel rushing past. Mason spotted a familiar face, Kevin Powell, a trusted member of his squad, and risked a soft whistle to catch his attention. Kevin's eyes widened in recognition. He quickly pulled them into an empty conference room. "Rivers, you crazy son of a..." Kevin embraced Mason briefly. "Captain Foster has the whole base looking for you. The good way, not the shoot-on-sight way." "Where is she?" Mason asked urgently. "Command Center with the Centauri representatives. Colonel Hartman's been detained for questioning along with 3 other officers." Kevin glanced at Zara with newfound respect. "This is the diplomat you rescued." "We rescued each other," Mason corrected. Kevin nodded appreciatively. I'll get you both to Foster. Stay behind me. They moved through the corridors with Kevin running interference. Twice they had to duck into side rooms to avoid security teams, still operating under Hartman's orders. Finally, they'd reached the command center doors. Inside, voices were raised in heated discussion. Kevin knocked in a specific pattern. The doors opened to reveal Captain Diane Foster, her expression shifting from tension to relief. Rivers. Thank God. She ushered them inside quickly. The room fell silent as Zara entered. Junior Envoy Calx stepped forward, his skin pulsing with emotional patterns too complex for Mason to read. Diplomat Velox. Calx greeted her in English. Your survival brings great joy. Foster directed them to a secure briefing area where several screens displayed the evidence they had transmitted. Additional data had been added: bank transfers, communication logs, and meeting records. Your information broke open the biggest conspiracy in this war's history, Foster explained. 17 high-ranking officials on our side, 12 on the Centauri side, all working to prolong the conflict for profit. And Hartman? Mason asked. In custody, along with your former superior, Envoy Dorax. Calx told Zara. The Coalition Council is convening an emergency session. Foster turned to Mason. We need your first-hand testimony. Both of you. Zara stepped forward, her diplomatic training evident in her composed bearing despite her ordeal. I will speak for my people. The truth must be known. Within hours, they stood before cameras broadcasting to both worlds. Mason in a fresh uniform, Zara in ceremonial robes provided by her delegation. Together, they recounted their journey, the attack, the discoveries, and most importantly, what they had learned about each other. 3 years ago, a translation error and corporate greed sparked a war between our species, Zara told the billions watching. Yesterday, a human soldier who should have been my enemy became my protector, my ally, and my friend. Mason stepped forward, and a Centauri diplomat showed me more courage and honor than many humans I've known. If we can find common ground after all that's happened, our worlds can too. The peace agreement was signed that evening. Not a temporary ceasefire, but a comprehensive treaty that included reparations for war victims and mechanisms to prevent future conflicts. As the formal proceedings concluded, Mason found Zora gazing out a viewport at the stars. What happens now? He asked quietly. Rebuilding begins, she replied. There is much work to be done. I meant for you, Mason clarified. Will you return to Xantaria? Zora's skin shifted through thoughtful patterns before settling on a calm blue with streaks of gold. Hope mixed with something new. Eventually. But the Coalition has asked me to remain as ambassador to Earth. She turned to face him. I requested you be assigned to my security detail. Mason smiled, surprised but pleased. From enemies to allies to colleagues. Perhaps even friends, Zora added, her skin briefly flashing the warm purple that Mason now recognized as affection. Outside the viewport, Earth turned slowly beneath them, its oceans and continents no longer battlegrounds but symbols of a new beginning, one made possible because a scared Centauri diplomat had found courage when she saw a human soldier, and he had seen beyond her alien form to the person within.